it's not.
Okay, so I've started it. All right. Hello, everybody. Whoever is joining us, welcome to the webinar today. And while everybody is taking time to join in and pour in, why don't you go ahead and put in the chat box, where are you joining us from today? How are you feeling today? And while you write in the chat box, please write it to everyone so that everybody can see. I see some of our old faces, or names, sorry. Hi, Naomi from Mumbai, Sanjay from Canada, Sriram from Santa Cruz, welcome. Harish, thank you so much. Henef, welcome back from Germany. Hi, Jayant. Great. Giridhar, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this space time and over again and making this a special, personal, intimate space for our conversations. Hello, Gunadid from Switzerland. I hope I said your name correct. Andrew, welcome. Okay. So while we are welcoming the people who are joining us, why don't I also introduce you all? It sounds very sweet how you pronounce it. Okay, thank you so much for the compliment. Okay, so I would like to introduce you to Mr. Dubey, who is very graciously joining us today for a very personal, intimate chat around kindness. And one reason when we thought of this theme for this month, the first person that came to mind was him. And so just to let you know, Mr. Dubey has been a former group president with Mahindra and Mahindra, and also CEO of Aftermarket Services. I'm sorry, I told you I'm not so good with the introductions. And he's currently connected and in various different positions of member or board member with several organizations like NHRD, governing body of International Labour Organization. So you can imagine a vast, rich experience, just like the vast, rich library behind him. So welcome and thank you so much, Mr. Dubey, for accepting to be in this space and having a chat with all of us.
Thank you. It's my privilege and my honor and my joy to be with you.
Thank you. So, as our participants know, and I mentioned it to you as well, that the theme that we chose for this month's conversations was kindness. And I have personally found you to be a very, very kind, humble, and true to heart person. And to be honest, not so many people we come across, especially in the corporate world. don't know if that has been your experience, but I think my experience has been like that, and most of the people would agree with me. So I have always wondered, like, what made you be who you are?
Oh boy, I wish I knew the answer to that, but I can only say that there are some things that come naturally to us, whether it is the genes or whether it is our prarabdha. Hindus would know what prarabdha means. It's the sort of the footprints from previous lives. So whatever, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you whether it was something I imbibed from my parents, but if you have noticed kindness in me, and there is a big if there, it is something that was just part of me. It's not something that I worked hard to develop, or I worked out equations of cost and benefit. Where should I do it? No, I mean, if at all, it is something that was always there, and it was just part of my inner space. And I stayed connected with it. In a sense, I tried to be who I am. There is kindness, and there are many other things also. So like everybody else, I think I'm a spectrum of beings. But maybe there are some parts of me that are more dominant. And I don't know. I mean, I myself was sort of very happy and pleasantly surprised when you said that when you discussed kindness, the first image that came to you was a bearded guy called Rajeev Dubey. So I don't know why you felt that, but the answer to your question is I have no idea where it's come from, but it's just there. And I just try not to suppress it too much. And whenever I have tried to suppress it, to be rational and to be corporate and to do cost benefit, I have, I think, paid deeply for it, both in terms of my personal happiness and, in fact, I think in terms of also the results that got produced. So despite a lot of people telling me that, look, this is corporate and you can't be nice and goody and and you'd better change. I was told that a few million times perhaps, but I just said I am who I am. I mean, that's it. And perhaps the universe was kind to me that I survived 45, 50 years in the corporate world. Or maybe the corporate world is not as bad as people make it out to be. Maybe it is simply a microcosm of the universe, and there are both sort of good people and bad people and kind people and cruel people, as there are everywhere else in the world. So.
Oh, that's interesting. And thank you so much. It's actually a very, I would say, very honest, sincere place that you are taking us all to. And I agree with you when you say that corporate is just like a microcosm of the rest of the universe. Then I would ask you, is that what really, in your view, what allowed you to maintain that originality that you had in you?
Yeah. So first, I must say that I was lucky. I worked with just two large industrial houses in India. One was the Tatas. I worked 29 years with the Tatas. And then, another 18 years with the Mahindras, and I'm still connected with them. It's, I'm on some boards, I chair a few companies. So perhaps the ethos and the soul of these two groups was made up of truth and compassion and service. And so there was an overall ethos, not that everybody was brimming over with truth and compassion and service, but this was the ethos in both the groups. So I think that helped. Then I was lucky that mostly, but not always, I got to deal with people who allowed me, to be who I was, with my moments of kindness and with my other warts and not so kind also, perhaps, I'm sure, maybe, I don't know. But I can only say that maybe I was lucky. I don't know. I mean, I by the way, I did have several encounters with people who did not take too kindly to what you're referring to as kindness. They thought I was namby-pamby and I needed to be much harsher and much tougher and get into the hire and fire mode and criticize people and stuff like that. But, that was not who I was. I mean, it was very difficult for me to change. And I believe that there is not one way of doing something. There is a saying in the Upanishads, one truth and a million paths to it. And ultimately, I believe that I had to follow my own star. I had to stay connected to myself. And then if I got the results that my organization expected of me, good. If I didn't, then, they were free to do what they wanted with me. Right. And then I would have to sort of stand up and be counted for who I was. And that's all I did. I just followed my instinct. And my instinct was to trust people. My instinct was to speak the truth. My instinct was to allow myself, my natural tendency to put myself into the shoes of the other person. And my instinct was to be of service. That it gave me great joy if I could drive positive change. Now, there were moments when I tried to suppress all this and to act rationally and to do cost benefit and bottom line and all the other horrible things that people do to make excuses for behaving badly. But it just didn't work for me. So finally, I said, I'll just be myself. And as I said, I was lucky. I got two organizations and I got good bosses. I got good people, mostly who are my peers and stuff like that. So that's the truth.
Thank you. So if I take you for a moment to those spaces where you say that I tried to be rational, logical, do cost benefit analysis, and it didn't work for me, what really took you to that space? And
yeah, it was, I think, the short-term pressure. So let me give you an example. In the year 2000, I was at that time the CEO of a company which was making foundry-grade iron. So it was in the steel industry. And then one day I got a call from the head office of the group that I worked with, which was the Tatas. And they said, we want to interview you along with others for a job. And, lo and behold, by the grace of the universe, I got selected and I was made the CEO of this company, a large agrochemicals company, which was in a very, very bad shape. And I was given a list of things by the board. Here is 23 people you have to ask them to go, which included many executive vice presidents and directors and all that. Here are the factories you have to close down. Here is the business that you must cut. Here are the number of people which we feel you should ask to leave. So all that list was given to me. Now, I must confess that because I was thrown into the fire, in the beginning, I took these things seriously, but it was very painful for me. It really bothered me. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the only way? I mean, if they want the company to be turned around, surely there are many other ways to do it. See, so finally I said, I'll just do it my way. And if the board or whoever wants to sort of come in and pull me up or whatever for not doing it their way, then let them do it. I mean, there are sort of many ways to make a living in this world, and I was prepared for that. And so I just did that. Right now, was I successful? In some cases, I was, depending on how you define successful. In some cases, it was a complete failure. Right. And then, as I said, you can't always predict in life. I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen. Is this the right way? I think it's the right way, but I will only know when the results come. Was it right or was it wrong? And then what is right and what is wrong? So these are some very fundamental questions. And what I'm leading up to, and you may find this almost funny, that finally business and business decisions are ultimately all deeply philosophical decisions. And any leader, I think, has ultimately to be a very sound philosopher, to be able to take decisions that are transformational, decisions that are significant, they have to be deeply thought through, and they are ultimately all philosophical. Okay, so I don't subscribe to the theory that because Jack Welch said this or some professor at the Harvard Business School said this, that's not God's truth for me. It's not. It used to be, and that I paid heavily for thinking so. But I would like to believe that one truth and a million paths to it. And Mr. Jack Welch, or I'm just giving that as an example, may have been one. I'm not obliged to follow it.
Yeah.
There could be so many other ways, and I would much rather be me. I have one life. I don't know whether I had previous lives. I don't know whether I will live again. But in this life that I have, I feel joy at being myself and connecting with my own space. And that's how I choose to be. I know maybe I'm dramatizing it. Maybe I'm much more of a coward and I don't actually do all these things. It's possible, but I'm telling you what I'm feeling right now. I told you, Kumar, I don't want to prepare for this at all. I'll just say what comes in my mind. And then, if it is sort of amusing, so be it.
No, it's not amusing at all. Rather, I am so glad. I can't be more happy to hear it from you, because that's what has been my sense all the time. Although I have never been like the leader at that level in those places where you have been, but observing it from the other side, observing my leaders, I've always felt like, and sort of felt like an outlier, because the kind of language that I speak and the kind of language which you're speaking right now, I felt like people don't understand it that much, and people don't really recognize or acknowledge that, yeah, this is the language which is required to be spoken in the human systems. Because corporate is not just about the process and products or what we're doing, but it is a human system. It's a social system that we are all a part of.
Yeah, I think increasingly, even in the big bad corporate world, this kind of view is emerging. And I think there's a revolution that has taken place in the last maybe 15, 20 years, which actually, if you want to put it into one nutshell, says that you can do good business and be a good person and a good corporate citizen. In fact, now I think what the belief is, or maybe that's my wishful thinking, that it's not just a good thing to be a good human being, but it's an absolute business necessity. Given, and I can give you a whole theory on this because I think so much about this. But I do believe that in the new normal, given the interconnectedness of things, it is a business imperative to be sensitive to the needs of others. So compassion or truth or trust, these are hardcore business imperatives. And now, thank God, there are people in the academic world, there are, I think, leaders I read about who are all saying this, that it's not just about a nice to do thing, but it's an absolute business imperative, right? And I know I've talked about beyond kindness, but I don't really know what the definition of kindness is. I'm actually talking about truth, compassion, service, and I'm using the word trust, right? But I'm just saying that these are core ingredients of the sort of ecosystem, which of course includes capital, technology, human capital, whatever are the ingredients that go into producing products and services. But finally, at the end of the day, it is about you're going to be serving human beings, and you're going to create all this with some human being somewhere in the system. And I think it, therefore, and I can kind of talk more cogently and logically than how I'm doing it. I see these as absolute imperative. And forget the word business. Business is not something which is completely different from the rest of the world. It's one aspect. But I think ultimately the kind of thinking that people have to go through, it's the same, whether it's in a corporate world, in the academic world, in politics, in the army, anywhere. I think the kind of questions that we have to ask and the kind of sort of processes that we have to deploy to get to the answers are identical. That's my experience also. I have worked across industries, I've worked across functions, I'm deeply connected with not-for-profit institutions. I have worked in steel, I worked in agrochemicals, I've dealt with insurance broking. I find no difference. Ultimately, it's the same. It's the same thing. I mean, the form changes, the manifestation of the forces change, but the basic elemental forces are all the same. You ask the same questions, you go through the same process and arrive at or try to find solutions. It's the same thing. But yes, the specifics change. I don't know
Wonderful.
where I've taken you very far away from kindness.
No, not at all. We are so much in line, and our audience is also sort of resonating with you. Gundid is saying, mobilizing our authentic self also unfolds our kindness and triggers kindness in others. That requires learning about our false self too, and agree there are organizations where people come from the kind side. That does not mean that there is no misunderstanding or conflict, but is the way to handle those on the base of mutual benefit. Thanks. So there a lot of appreciation. They're resonating for what you're saying. And Manmeet is saying that it is assuring to see someone so attuned to his own space. And I think when we speak about, a lot of leadership development today, a lot of work is happening in those spaces. I think what you have touched upon is the core of it, that more than anything else, we do need leaders to be attuned to their own inner self, their own awareness.
Yeah, because ultimately that's what decides what kind of decisions they take. So that's the logic, that you forget about your Harvard and Yale and wherever IMD Lausanne degrees when you're in the heat of the moment and when you have to take a decision very quickly. It's who you are that actually comes out, right? And therefore, if leaders are not connected to their own selves, they will not be consistent in their decision making. So there is a huge sort of logic in there of why people should be connected. Absolutely. And I can build up other logic also, by the way, but I think
absolutely, we are all ears for whatever you want to share in this space today. And so you've mentioned about, like, there are sometimes these short-term gains also that you have to look for, and then there are all these degrees that are also sitting heavily on you. What really helped you in that space, in that zone, to always stay connected to your own awareness and your own sense of right and wrong?
In a sense, I followed my instinct. And I was lucky to have a few people around me who encouraged me to do that. And who kept on telling me that, do it your own way. You don't have to imitate others, or you don't have to go around finding the benchmark. How was it done here and how was it done there? Use your own mind, use your own heart, use your own soul, and do it your way. Okay. And as I said, then I must also say I was lucky if I survived for so long. I could have been axed, I could have been thrown out. I could have been, and I was several times. It's not that it was always a smooth sailing. But I would just say that I followed my instincts. Ultimately, I think that's it. And the universe was mostly kind to me. And I'm grateful for that. And I take no credit whatsoever, because I know that there are millions of people who are much smarter than I am, who know much more than me, who deserve much more than me, and who don't get it. So the fact, if I got something, I just have to be terribly grateful for it, and sort of look at it and not identify myself with what results were produced, but identify myself with what did I think and what did I do.
Wonderful.
And how did I do it? So I think that's the other thing. And that's partly an answer to how do you reconcile short-term imperatives and, and the way you do. So it's about why, it's about what, but it's equally about how do I do things. And that often makes a huge difference, especially with respect to kindness.
Mm.
Kindness is, of course, what you do, surely, but oftentimes what you do can also be very unkind depending on how you do it. So it's a combination of the why, what, and the how that really sort of, I think, manifests itself in what is called kindness or lack of it.
Wonderful. Yes. So the focusing on not just what you're doing, but how and in what ways you're doing it. Like earlier you said that one truth can have like thousands of ways to convey it and do it.
Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge this, what you've spoken about your own personal ecosystem, the system that sort of enabled you and supported you, the people around you who helped you stay centered and grounded in your own truth and listening to your instincts. Because sometimes, a lot of people don't get that kind of a system or don't have that ecosystem around them. So I think one thing that I'm personally taking away is the significance of being aware of what sort of ecosystem we are in and how we can sort of build up that system for ourselves as well.
Yeah, and this is as old as the hills. The fact that in English, for example, company maketh a man, or something like that, right? And in our Indian system, the sangat that you keep, that defines you. It's the kind of people you relate to, how you choose what you're calling the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it makes, I think, huge difference. I mean, let's put it this way, that of course, if you are true to yourself, then regardless of who you keep as company, you will probably still may end up doing the same things. But everything else being the same, the company that you keep or the ecosystem, the people you go to for advice, that makes a huge difference. Who are your role models? Who do you look up to? That makes a huge difference. Certainly does. And of course, it also shapes your own attitudes, your own views of the world. And then, those are the things on which we make decisions. And as I said, I am very clear that all business decisions ultimately are philosophical decisions. I have absolutely zero doubt on that. Now you can ask me, what is a philosophical decision, right?
Yes, please. That's the next thing. Yeah.
So I think elements of what is desirable and what is not desirable, or what is right and what is not right, those things come in there. Moral values.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know I'm treading on very dangerous ground now, so I have to think it through. But ultimately, it is about values. What are the values that we have? What is it that we think is right? And what do we think is not right? Right? And that determines what we do and how we do it and why we do things.
Right.
I mean, that is philosophy. I mean, why? The why.
So you have taken us on a complete journey of what and then how, and now we are landing onto the why, which is also very
which is
important.
actually the starting point, actually.
The starting point.
And that is what I think that's what philosophy is all about. I think, as I said, I'm not an academic. I'm thinking, and as I said, I didn't prepare all this. So I'm now really thinking on my feet, and I'm really praying that I'm not talking rubbish. And I hope if I am, then somebody will, be true to themselves and point it out and challenge me. That will be wonderful.
No, I think our audience is definitely resonating with you, because they are very quiet when they're really
they're switched off.
They've gone into their thinking space as to really connected with the inner self. But please feel free to put any observations, any comments or questions in the chat box. And what you said right now sort of makes me thinking, because I was listening to this news recently that in Europe at various different airports, there's a lot of chaos, because what happened in the beginning of pandemic, a lot of people have been let out from their jobs. And now the businesses are suffering because they don't have that kind of a time and people to support all of a sudden opening up of businesses. And I was wondering, could there have not been any other way to deal with it in the beginning? And it's connecting to what you said about the morality.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, of course. Of course. I mean, so what is it? You want to cut costs, you want to conserve cash. There are many ways of doing that other than sacking people. But the easiest thing to do is to sack people, you see. So you sack them. But every business, I mean, there could be, differences in the degree. There are many aspects of cost and cash conservation. And there are many ways also to cut down costs, you see. Instead of only the poor workers and the lower down people, if the CEO takes a 50% cut in his salary, in many cases, that will take care of 1,000 people. Right? What I'm saying, we can go more granular into that. But, to answer your question, at least I believe that there are many ways of, having reacted to the pandemic, both from the point of view of cost and cash conservation, and if you ask me, the way we handled the pandemic itself, but we won't go into that. But definitely the fact of job losses, was all that absolutely necessary? Could there have been other things? I believe there could have been other things. And I know many companies that did not sack people. They did many other things, including, we'll all take salary cuts, we'll postpone capital expenditure, we'll look into our working capital. I mean, there were many ways, but we won't sack people. That was a philosophical decision some CEOs or owners took. And is it that their businesses collapsed? No. In fact, they came back much faster, because when demand picked up, they had the people and the expertise and the skills to get back, right? So I'm not going to just believe, just because somebody sitting in the Columbia Business School said business is for business, whatever crap he said. Why should I believe that? I'll believe what I believe. And I think the problem is that we are afraid to be true to ourselves. We just blindly listen to some things, people or institutions who we think are correct. And they need not always be correct, because if you go into what they're saying, ultimately it's based on one or two postulates, and those postulates are open to question. A whole edifice of reasoning is made, and it is made on, as anybody who has studied logic would tell you, on certain postulates or hypotheses. And those hypotheses and postulates are points of view which you need not agree with. And if you don't agree with those postulates, then the rest of the logic and the results that you arrive at are not true for you, because you don't agree and you have not accepted the original hypothesis or the postulate. And I think that's what's happening. People are blindly agreeing and blindly following that this is the right way to do it, and we are not questioning it, or that this is the right thing to do. But I think there are many right things to do. There's no one answer, that's for sure.
And Manoj is writing, being holistic and staying calm while facing challenging situations when dealing with people's life in your decision making needs courage and self-confidence. Yes, absolutely agree. Okay, so there's quite a lot. So now what I want to ask you is, like, now you are out of that corporate suit.
Not totally,
Not totally, but still.
I'm still the chairman of 3 companies, but it's non-executive. So you can say I'm out of the C-suite. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're a coach. Huh? So, and you're a coach as well. So where do you see this going in future? Like your idea and your rich experience of treating business decisions, not just as business decisions, but as philosophical decisions and the morals and ethics. Where do you think it will take you personally? And how do you see the roles coaches can play towards making the world a little more attuned to themselves?
Okay. So with your permission and with sort of humility, I'd like to say that no, these are business decisions, but what I actually meant was that business decisions ultimately are philosophical decisions. You can't sort
Yeah.
of, say, oh, this is business, and then on another shelf or on another railway track, there is values and morals and philosophy. I'm saying that the two are like
To
this.
have synergy. Yeah.
And I would like to acknowledge that and not go around pretending that business is based on facts and logic and all that, because all the so-called facts and logic are full of subjectivity and values and attitudes and half truths and sort of total nonsense and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the first one. Where do I see myself going? I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue. I've actually just relocated to Delhi, and I said, now I'm going to figure out. Uh, so yes, I am a coach in the sense that I have a coaching certificate, something called the PCC. Uh, I think it's the only thing probably I can try and do, and I'm not a terribly qualified person, and I don't feel that I have the expertise to do too many things. So the only place where I may be accepted, it's a very big may, probably is something called coaching or mentoring or maybe a little bit of consulting, all the three mixed together, maybe. But I'm not, but for me, that has to be only a small part of my life, because I do want also to be able to teach. I'm very fond of reading, and I do want to have some time to myself. I'm very deeply into yoga. And also, I do want to do some more seva. I have been very selfish all my life. I still am very selfish. I have got so much from the universe, and I have given very little back. And I do want to be able to devote some of my remaining time, whatever the universe gives me, to being of service to people, because the universe has given me so much. So coaching and mentoring, sort of professionally, little bit, some amount of teaching, some amount of learning, a lot of yoga and seva. So I see a mix of these things as making up one day in the life of Rajeev Dubovich going forward, but I don't know what percentage each of these will occupy. So that's the sort of that's the state where I'm in. I'm still trying to figure it out.
That's good. I think that's a good state. And I don't know what makes you say that, I've been selfish. And in what ways do you think you've been selfish? Because I think it's worked not just for you, but for a lot of people in many, many positive ways.
Yeah, but I've always thought of myself first. I have to be truthful. Yeah.
But isn't
That's,
that how we should be doing?
I don't know, I mean, is that, I don't know. So as I said, now this is a space that I have not explored very much, but I know, I mean, I see people who, for example, I have never been like Mother Teresa, or if there is some calamity, I have never rushed out and, given my time to be in a flood affected area. I have not. I've always been sitting there. Yes, let's allocate, money, and let's organize teams. But I have never been there in the front line. And that is what irks me. And that's what I call selfishness. That I have stayed in the comfort of my air conditioned room and, sat there and said, okay, now we'll send so many people to attend to the flood hit people there, and we'll donate so much money. But that's okay. But have I ever gone myself and been there in the front line? Or during the pandemic, did I go out and, give food to the migrant workers? I never did that. I was sitting home alone, selfishly, saving myself from the virus. So that's what I mean by selfishness. Even today, I'm first worried, I must put my house in order first and, get all the furniture in and get all my books done. I've done that first. I've not gone out and fed poor people on the streets or helped orphans or anything of that kind. So that's what I mean by selfishness.
Okay, I think that's a much deeper conversation for some other time. But from your experiences and the way you see, new thought process and are developing in the workspaces, corporate spaces, where do you see the role of coaches in general?
Yeah, see, now it all depends on what you mean by coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a coach is a process or a person that is going to unleash the potential of people and of ecosystems, then of course there's a huge role for it, right? Uh, so I personally think that the basic idea behind coaching is sound, but as happens in everything, there will be coaches and there will be coaches, and of course there will be supply and there will be demand. But I think that overall, there is a need for people who can help unleash the potential of people towards achieving the purpose, right? So I think overall, I think that there is a need. Now, I don't know how the supply and demand forces are moving. It's becoming very popular. Lots of people are getting certification, and so maybe they'll all be totally fully employed or busy. It's possible. I think it's possible, but I don't know that space, I must tell you that. But I know that overall, if coaching be the unleashing of potential to achieve the purpose, then it is something that is needed now and was always needed, right? It's just that the word coaching and coaching institutes and coaching theories, all that has become suddenly very popular, right? I wonder why. Maybe there was so much need for it, and that's why it's
Mm-hmm.
come up, right? So, but you'll also have the same thing, that you'll have plenty of coaches, then you'll have to, figure out, who's going to work for whom. And so there will be takers for different kinds of coaches, there'll be different needs. But I must confess that I'm a bit out of my depth here, except to say that unleashing of potential is required. And I think that there is so much uncertainty and volatility and interconnectedness. More than anything else, I think the principles of coaching to me make a lot of sense, because there is so much interconnectedness now, and therefore it requires, I think, an approach that is slightly different. If coaching encourages people to be sensitive to the needs of others, if coaching actually requires you to have compassion, compassion is the ability to be sensitive to the needs of others, right? To put yourself into the shoes of the other person. If coaching implies being able to create trust, if these, I think these are very fundamental things, that are required in the world, including in the corporate world. So from that point of view, I think it's a good time to be a coach. But is it a better time than before? I don't know. Were coaches required before? I guess they were. But this whole coaching culture and so many people coming in and becoming coaches wasn't there, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe it was, and I wasn't aware of it. That's also possible, but I don't think it was there. Correct? I don't know. Komal, do you have the statistics? Maybe people here would have.
I don't have the statistics, but I do have people responding. So Kathy is saying that I fully agree with your reflections about coaching. And Manoj is saying coaching community is growing to help and support each other to grow individually as a person and support others to redefine their own purpose in life, build agility within the current VUCA environment. So I think, and I think what you have embodied all through your career of being a very centered, grounded, and operating from the source of self.
That's what I have said, but we don't know whether I was actually that. But let's sort of
It
accept
has
that.
showed in your experience, and that's what I've heard you when you've said and spoken, is something where we see that more and more work is required to be done, especially for leaders or for the larger corporate systems or organizations. That's how it seems to me. But from your point of view, because you've also been very closely associated with the larger international groups and organizations, right, where both the so how does this look at those levels where there could be so many different interests?
Yeah. So, so the one international organization with which I'm connected is the International Labor Organization. Now, that's a very focused organization. Their objective is to ensure social justice and through decent work, right? So social justice through decent work, it was created in 1919 after the First World War, where some wise men, industrialists, got together and came to the conclusion that you cannot have peace in the world unless you have decent work, unless the working force is treated better and their needs are looked after, you cannot have peace in the world. I mean, this was the analysis that they did, and that's the origin of the International Labour Organization. So clearly, at least since my sort of global exposure, other than what I had through my corporate world, but the only global organization that I'm connected with is the International Labour Organization, which is a tripartite body. There's workers, there's employers, and there's governments, right? So clearly here, there is a huge scope for the application of the principles of coaching, because you're all the time dealing with intense conflict, very, very differing points of view, each one thinking he or she is right. How do you get, and you know that the only way forward is by coming to a consensus, by agreeing, by talking to each other, by listening deeply. So these are the principles of coaching, that, by trying to figure out what is the problem, and asking probing questions, listening deeply, giving direct feedback, having an action plan. I mean, so you could say that this applies to everything. It's not only coaching, but these are fundamental principles of coaching, and they apply hugely in the International Labour Organization because of the nature of its constituents and its stakeholders, right? So now, and then the ILO is part of the United Nations system, right? Now there are many people who would like to believe that multilateral organizations don't have a role, that is all now bilateral and trilateral. So I'm not going into that. But we can see that there is a lot of problems that humanity has to face. The big one is climate change, right? And what climate change will do to the world of work, right? And that requires cooperation. Here, you cannot have winners and losers. We will all lose together, or we will all win together, right? And that, I think, is what coaching is all about, right? That we need to win together. Okay.
Absolutely.
So from that point of view, I think that the global organization that I am connected with as a member of its governing body, the principles of coaching apply deeply out there. And my sense is that they apply everywhere, right? But you have to, I think, not get too mechanistic about it. That's my worry about coaching. That coaching is becoming very mechanistic. Here are the 83 questions you have to ask. You have to say, you have to, I can't say this, I can't say that. So the whole thing is so artificial. I observe a lot of coaches, and some of them try to coach me, and I'm saying, this is shit, man. This is not natural. Come on, get out of those that I was taught to say, and can't do this. But it must flow. Right, so you have to get beyond the. I'm sorry if I'm offending somebody, but that's what I feel. That you have to flow, you have to be genuine and not be boxed in and not get mechanistic. You have to flow, and that's what I think has to happen in the world. And my apologies. I think I use a couple of very undesirable.
That's perfectly all right, and that made a lot of people say, yes, it's true. So again, a lot of people are resonating with you. And I also resonate quite a lot with when you say that, because I don't think any professional qualification is for individuals to adapt to that qualification, but to make it their own, like, how you can take that and embody it without losing your own self in it.
Yeah, and and not to use too much jargon. That at least I find it very artificial. Too much jargon of anything. I mean, but maybe that's my ego. I think that's my ego. I have to admit
that. No, I think I think jargons limit our understanding or our flow of conversation and communication.
No, I think jargon also have a lot of value, but I guess it's how you use it, right? How you use it. So the minute it starts appearing as if it's put on and it's not authentic, that it's not coming from something that you feel, it's not that where you're doing things because that's the right thing to do and not because you believe that it's the right thing. I don't know whether I'm conveying what I wanted to
No,
convey.
absolutely. And what you're saying is again taking me back to your why, how, and what. Like, okay, so if jargon is there, why is it there? What purpose is it really serving? Is it serving any purpose at all? And then
And how is it to be used? Because if you know
how?
18 jargons or 18 sort of words, not jargons, you don't have to use all 18 in each sentence.
Absolutely.
I
So,
guess I made
Manoj,
my point.
yes. So Manoj is saying to me, the basic need for a coach is human connection, people to trust and be a great listener. And Amy is saying the process is never greater than people. It's about the people, and the process is there to support the people. Thank you so much. And this sort of remind me, somewhere in some of your interview, you said that human is not a resource.
Yeah, that it's the source. Is that what I said? I said,
Yes, that it's the source.
yeah.
And that I think is such a simple but very, very deep and very powerful recognition.
Yeah, yeah. Having said that, I think what I really want to say is that it's not either this or that. It's not that it's only about human beings. No, of course you need to have strategy, structure, processes, metrics. You need that, but you can't ignore the human side. It's like you can't use only the so-called left brain or only the right brain. When you're approaching any situation, you have to use the whole mind. You have to combine the two. And I think in any situation, whether it be business or academics or politics or global or domestic, I think you have to combine. You have to combine the human aspect with other aspects. I think that's the whole point. You can't say I'll ignore the other aspects and only deal with the human aspects. You can't say that, nor the other way around, that I will not care about the human aspect. I will only address the so-called objective, scientific stuff, as if human beings are not scientific. Okay, and so when I have said, and I don't know where I've said it, if you've heard me say that humans are the source, it would have been in a certain context that for the purpose of this particular conversation, I'm not going to be talking about strategy, structure, processes, and metrics, but I will be looking at things from the point of view of the human being, because ultimately it is human beings who create the strategy, it is human beings who would create the processes, and therefore in that sense human beings are the source. But it does not mean that the so-called hard stuff is not important. It is, but it has to be done with the soft stuff. That's what I meant.
Balance of
Yeah.
both. Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And in so much of how you're sharing and what you're explaining, I'm listening and I'm remembering what Ram speaks about coaching and his philosophy and theories. And it's so resonating with his ideas of coaching as well. So that's that's quite wonderful to have.
Again, I have great respect for Ram, but I want to have a dig at myself. Great men think alike and fools seldom differ. So I would prefer to be a fool.
To differ in ways.
It's easier to be and more relaxing to be a fool than to bear the burden of being a great man.
Isn't it the same in both the ends?
So now we are getting into an interesting territory, and maybe that's
Another philosophical.
other time. And then we'll have to ask, why is it an important question? But I think what you're saying, depending on how you define things,
Mhm.
We may well come to the conclusion that it's the same thing. But as I said, I think that calls for another conversation. But it could be a very interesting conversation, Komal. We should have it. I don't know
Absolutely.
whether it's and it's probably pretty practical also, I think.
Yes. I remember because so one of my teacher once he wrote, so he had this habit of writing on the blackboard some thought every day, just for students to read and think about it. So one day he wrote that uh, you can learn even from fools. And then just below he said, you would learn exactly what not to do. I was like, it had a lot of fun, but it made a lot of sense, because half the things we learn in life through their presence, and the other half we learn through their absence.
Yeah. So, I would ask that person who wrote on the board, who is a fool?
That's another question to
Yeah,
ask.
and who decides who the fool is, and
Who the fool is. And I think that also
why the
depends.
fool is a fool.
Yes.
So I think, but that's a different thing. But ultimately, I think the point is that it's really the context that decides who's a fool and who's not a fool, and who's a great man, and the same person in different situations doing the same things can be called great, or can be called the biggest fool. So that's what my experience in life is. Nobody is great and nobody is a fool. It's all a question of the context in which you deal with that person. So I have dealt with people who have been great in some situations. These gentlemen do the same thing in another situation, and they're total failures, and they're called fools. So what are they? Are they great or are they fools?
So it's the context makes it, because sometimes even the greatest of thinkers who've been so called to be have so much before the time, before the rest of the world was ready for their ideas, were called as fools or subjugated for saying so many other different words. But
Yeah, so it really, it's all I mean, there's so many. So I mean, maybe we should talk about it some other time.
Absolutely.
You've opened up a
Right now,
huge.
I think what it's leading me into conversation is that I think the time is quite right now for the way you've been in your corporate life, like very centered, grounded, self-aware leader, and to create more of such systems around us. How do you look at that?
So I'll have to spend a little time understanding the question, Komal, but I certainly, I mean, I think that answers must depend on the questions and must depend on the context and the frame, right? So if there are frames and situations where this applies, being centered, then it's certainly something that we should create more. There are some situations where maybe it is better not to be too centered. I can think theoretically of some things. But generally speaking, if centeredness means not getting carried away by success, or not getting too depressed by failure, if centered means that, then it's a good space, generally speaking. Generally speaking. Okay. But this is too deep a question that you have posed, Komal. I mean, I'll have to unpeel it and then try and see if I can give you a sensible answer. Right now, I'm not capable of that. So therefore, I'm giving you a really stupid answer. I've just given you.
No, it's not stupid. I mean, I'm not the one who's disagreeing with you. It's the people who are listening to, and they're like, they are benefiting with this conversation and your from the heart, candid sharing. Manmeet is saying that listening to you gives me courage to be myself. I think that's good.
Yeah.
And thanking for insightful conversation. So we have just coming top of the hour, and I'll leave it up to you. Any final message or anything that you would like us to take away from your experience, from your journey?
Yeah. Okay. So let me try and see if I can create two or three things. So number one is there is always an opportunity for doing something, but what is the purpose that we approach something with? So I think knowing what is our purpose in a situation is really the starting point. The second is that there is vast untapped potential in every human being and in every situation. And I think unleashing that potential is something that is really required to be done, especially in organizations. The third is that very often we jump into doing things, right? We jump into the what and the how without spending enough time on asking the why and in asking what the question is, right? So I think we need to spend a fair amount of time in making sure we're getting the right question. And the last point is that we live in an interconnected world, and therefore we have to be really sensitive to the needs of each other, not because it is sort of philosophically or morally the right thing to do, but from a very practical point of view, that in an interconnected world, we have to be really full of compassion, and the role of purpose and the role of trust is really, really critical for business, for politics, for anything. And I think, and this may sound not very right, but I do believe that one set of forces that will drive this point home really strongly is climate change, where there will not be winners and losers. We will either all win or we will all lose. And I dare say that many problems, at both micro and macro level will be of this kind, where there will not be, it will not be possible to have winners and losers, but we will need to win together or lose together. And if we are aware of that, that should, decide how we behave with each other. So these are some of the things that, and
So much.
and last point is nobody is greater than anyone else. I think we are all all the same.
Absolutely. That is quite beautiful. And thank you so much for your candid sharing, Mr. Dubey. It's been a pleasure to speak to you after 4 years, in person though virtually. And I hope that we talk more and connect more. And yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for the questions that you have posed and for providing me the space to talk freely. And that's wonderful. It's not something that happens very often. I have no idea how many people are listening. That's one good thing about these virtual chats. You don't know how many people there are, right? Because sometimes you may tend to get unnerved if there are too many people or if there's nobody there. Right now, I don't know it. Maybe there's just, I know that there are a few people because there are some comments, I'm not reading them. But I was made very comfortable by you and by your questions. So I want to thank you very much for that. It's been wonderful for me. And if I have upset anybody with some choice of words or comments, then I seek your forgiveness for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for holding the space for both of us to have this conversation. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Mr. Dubey.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Good night. Good day to you all.